Hey there folks, it's Scott once again and welcome to another video. This time I'm going to be talking about the very underrated and quintessential 1980s film, Roadhouse. Right here I have the Blu-ray DVD combo. I do have the other one by Shop Factory which has more features than this one does, but I didn't even feel like wanting to dig for it, and plus it's still sealed actually. I have yet to even watch that Blu-ray of it. But I eventually will get rid of this one along with 5 other Blu-rays I'm going to be getting rid of, and Supergirl DVD on eBay. I might put the link in the description below in case y'all have an interest in buying all these Blu-rays plus the Supergirl DVD that I have. But yeah, very underrated flick from the late 1980s. It's considered by many, cheesy or so bad it's so good, or the most manliest, machoistic type of film, and there is those elements. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's a very fun and entertaining flick. Filled with some notable one-liners like "Pain don't hurt," or "I want you to be nice till it's time to not be nice," or during a fight scene, "You're too stupid to have a good time." Lines like those, and many others, if I can think of any. But yeah, getting back to the roll of things, still for 30 years old, it still holds up. Unfortunately, there was a unrelated sequel that I heard wasn't very good, and there was going to be a supposed remake back in 2015 with Ronda Rousey, but that eventually got canned, so thankfully we didn't get that sequel. And so Swayze, this is definitely his movie, definitely his most well-known film, even though the film didn't do that great. He was coming off, his success of Dirty Dancing, which definitely made a lot more money. Then in between that, he made a couple films like Still Dawn, and he made some TV film, I think called, I forget what it's called, but I heard it wasn't very good. Let's see, it came out in '88. It was called, hey, come on, going by the Wikipedia, Tiger Warsaw. Heard it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't a TV flick, but it didn't get a whole lot of, publicity when it was released. He also had this film, and he also had another film out in '89 called Next of Kin, which I've yet to fully watch, but it seems like a good film. And he was also going to have another film if he wasn't injured. He was going to do, believe it or not, Tango and Cash, but I think he suffered some knee problems, and that's why he had to turn down the role of Cash, which eventually went to Kurt Russell, which I'm glad in a way it went to Kurt Russell because that definitely suits him. But it would have been interesting to see how Swayze would have done in that role as Gabriel Cash in that film. How he would have worked with Sylvester Stallone, since that would have been their only film they would have worked together on, but they would never work together, so it would have been cool. But anyways, let's get on with it. I'm going to go from the crew and the cast from the Wikipedia. You have Rowdy Herrington, who directed this film. He previously directed a film that I liked called Jack's Back, which was like a horror thriller type film. And this film was produced by, the veteran action producer Joe Silver. He produced many films like Predator, the first 2 Lethal Weapon films at that time, 48 Hours. I think he did the sequel as well. He did the next 2 Lethal Weapon films, Die Hard 2. I can't remember if I mentioned Die Hard. If I did, I'm sorry. If I did, I don't mean to repeat myself, but I figured I'd go ahead and say it again in case if I forgot. But anyways, he produced films like that, Demolition Man, you name it. I thought he would have been involved in Tango and Cash, but I didn't see that, I don't think. Pretty sure I didn't. But anyways, the screenplay was written by David Lee Henry, Hilary Hinken. I don't know what they've done. Lee Henry also wrote the story as well. And of course, the film stars Patrick Swayze as the cooler / specialized bouncer with a mysterious past. Then you have Kelly Lynch as Elizabeth Clay, doctor specifically. You have Sam Elliott as Wade Garrett, basically Dalton's old friend and the one who probably taught him all the ways of being a bouncer and stuff like that. So then you have the main villain, Brad Wesley, played by Ben Gazzara. He would go on to play a villain in a film called Shadow Conspiracy. He's been in other films as well. You have Kevin Teague as Frank Tillman, the guy that hires Dalton to be the cooler at the Double Deuce. Then you have Red West as Red Webster, Jeff Healey as Cody. He's the blind man Cody, who is this band. He's actually blind in real life, and he all things considering the fact that he's blind, he's a pretty good vocalist and guitarist as well. Sadly, he's no longer with us anymore. Same with Patrick Swayze as well. Then you have Sunshine Parker as Emmett, Marshall Teague as Jimmy, John Doe as Pat McGurn, Kathy Wilhoit, I think is her name, as Carrie Ann. Then you have Terry Funk as Morgan, Julie Michaels as Denise. You have Keith David in there as Ernie Bass, or Bass, I guess I should say, not Bass, but Ernie Bass is the new bartender. Oh yeah, and Anthony De Longus as Gary Ketchum. So you got some notable faces in this film. And basically I'll go into the plot. Hopefully I won't take too much time on it. I had to rewatch some clips, that way I can get a fresh perspective on things. So basically we see, a guy by the name of Dalton, who's basically a cooler, specialized bouncer. He has a mysterious past. He basically is, trying to be level-headed about, this club. There's a guy that tries to start something. He tries to prevent, an even bigger fight from breaking out. He actually gets slashed in the arm because he wants to challenge Dalton, but Dalton, even though he says outside, he actually, doesn't fight him, and then the bouncers that apparently he's trained, stand in front and say, you're not getting back in there. So he tries to play it cool, and then apparently this guy by the name of Tillman, which is Kevin Teague's character, he's basically wants him to be the bouncer at this place called the Double Deuce in Jasper, Missouri, and it's turned into a slaughterhouse pretty much. The eyeballs being swept up. Vigorous, intense fighting scenes are happening there. You name it. And then he eventually arrives there by driving his BMW, and he ends up lodging at a local farm owned by Emmett. I believe his name is, I could swear his name is Pete Emmett, but I guess he goes by Emmett. So he lodges there for a bit. He actually buys some kind of used 1965 Buick Riviera, and he also buys some spare tires, which you'll find out why. And his actual real car is a 1986 Mercedes with New York license plates, because he was previously in the club at New York. And he also keeps it hidden because eventually, whenever he deals with disgruntled bar patrons, like for example, some people are. He eventually, when he comes to the club, he starts to fire people. Or actually, I take it back. He starts to become a little observant of who's willing to stay and who's willing to cause problems later. In, like he fires one of the bartenders for dealing with drugs instead of booze, which is what they sell. They don't do that stuff. And he fires Morgan, who has a very bad temper. And eventually he fires a guy by the name of Steve because he always lets these ladies in with probably no ID, and they might be underage or something like that. Or they may not be underage, but he just lets them out without kind of any form of official identification, or authentic, I should say. And then apparently Pat, I know his name's Pat, but Pat McGurn is then fired. He's one of the bartenders for skimming, and this is one of the early attempts to try and clean up the place because of their unruly and undisciplined practices that they have perform in that club, which is not SOP. So eventually, one of them has a connection to this person by the name of Brad Wesley, who is basically this who has like a stranglehold on the town. Basically, he's like the ultimate villain, where he runs things. Little happens without his knowledge and approval, and one of them gets involved with Wesley, like Morgan, and then of course Pat's actually Wesley's nephew, and there's actually one night that actually Dalton is actually physically forced to remove one of Wesley's henchmen. He gets in a fight with one of them. In fact, one of them actually slashes at his side, suffers a knife wound. He has to go to the hospital for stitches, and during that time he strikes up a friendship with Doc Elizabeth Clay, which is Kelly Lynch's character. And then Wesley tries to actually create more problems for Dalton, like during the part where the bar is, slowly, starting to attract patrons just little by little without the violence and all that. One of Wesley's henchmen by the name of Ketchum has a knife in the right boot, and this is where you hear the famous line, "You're too stupid to have a good time," and both Dalton and the well-trained bouncers, start to fight off the main henchmen and all that stuff. And during that time, Doc and Dalton are getting to know one another, and they go on a date. And despite the ugly lifestyle, Doc continues to establish a relationship with Dalton. Like, for example, and then of course when they drive back to his car, you see how his car has been trashed. And earlier they did far worse to it, like they bent the antenna, put a knife through the tires, and smashed up the windshield. There's like a hole. They smashed the glass of the main windshield, and that's why you'll see why Dalton gets those spare tires, as you saw earlier. And then, in an attempt to make some supposed innocent attempt to make peace, but of course has an ulterior motive. Wesley, summons Dalton to his home, and then he tries to get him to, work for him, and also reveal that he had a cousin in Memphis that knows some of what Dalton's past, by mentioning an incident where Dalton, killed a man in Memphis, Tennessee, and claimed it as self-defense. And of course, Dalton decides to decline the offer. You see that Wesley starts to attack a particular parts place where Dalton buys like a windshield wiper at Red's barn, which is Red West's character. They start to create chaos there, create a mess like oil and stuff like that. And he also tries to interfere with the liquor deliveries to the Double Deuce when the club is really starting to become a lot more upscale and improve in business. Like there's even a line, and there's running out of booze, and Dalton's somehow able to get on the phones and make it happen. And I think he also managed to also connect with a mentor and friend, which is actually Wade Garrett, which is Sam Elliott's character. And he basically might need his help, and he invites him to come down. And there's actually a attempt where Dalton has to fight off these more of Wesley's henchmen and thugs as well, which includes Morgan, O'Connor, and of course Tigger, and this really tall dude, I forget what his name is. They're one of the liquor guys is trying to deliver, and they're trying to stop it, and he gets into a fight. But unfortunately, he's probably 1 against 4. But luckily, Wade just happens to show up, and after that disconcerting phone call, he helps him out. They're able to defeat his thugs, or Wesley's thugs. And him and Dalton share some fun times, and Dalton introduces Doc to Wade, whom, Wade does like her, but he is trying to tell Dalton to just, slow it down and not drag so much baggage and some unexpected parts of his past into her life. So, and then when eventually one night Dalton and Doc eventually engage in a love affair. Physically, they get intimate. Apparently, Wesley's watching this, and apparently he had a thing for her. Supposedly, it's been said that he was actually once married to Elizabeth, but eventually she left him because she realized what a bad person and what a despicable villain Wesley is. Of course, later that evening, when the Fred Webster, which is actually Doc's uncle, the local the auto parts store of his business has been destroyed by a fire. When he refuses to give in to Wesley's persistent extortion demands, like earlier he tried to extort Red for more money, and probably does the same to certain other businesses too, just to show how much of a power hold that Wesley holds over the town of Jasper. And so basically that night when the place blows up, Wesley and his men are found inside the club, and Dalton wanted to not excavate matters or create a huge scene. He allows them to have a drink, and then there's a musical number that goes on, which is actually pretty cool. And then Wesley allows this one lady, Julie Michaels, which I guess is Denise. I guess she's somewhat involved with Wesley, but she likes to party it up and have fun and whatnot. Starts dancing around, and she tries to, try to seduce Dalton, but Dalton's is not, amused by it, and has her, leave and whatnot. Then eventually, more of Wesley's henchmen starts to wreak havoc in the bar, and then his main man, or his main number one in charge, or main henchman, is Jimmy. He starts to create some chaos. He actually takes out several of Dalton's trained bouncers, just to show how how vicious he is. He's apparently a violent ex-con and skilled martial artist, kind of like how Dalton is as well too. He starts a brawl with double users. Like, he has a brief skirmish with Wade, and actually has another one with actually Dalton. But then Wesley shoots his gun and ends the fight and leaves the club. And then Pete Strondemeyer, who actually attempts to help Red, actually becomes Wesley's next victim when he refuses to pay as well. He has one of his goons, Ketchum, demolish the dealership, and has a monster truck drive all over the cars, and some people are cheering, and then some people who are probably the locals, along with Dalton and his friends, look on with contempt. And basically Wesley is probably enticing Dalton to leave, and that night, Doc tries to persuade him to leave, to maybe in the hopes that Wesley will stop doing this attempt at trying to extort people and create more chaos and contempt for everyone. And Dalton is not having it, but then he's interrupted whenever Emmett's house goes on fire. Luckily, Dalton manages to get Emmett out in time. He realizes that Jimmy is the one that probably caused all this, and he sees Jimmy fleeing the scene, manages to intercept him, and they engage in a pretty vicious and intense fight, where both trade some shots and blows and some kicks and whatnot. Then when Dalton starts to get the upper hand, Jimmy attempts to grab a pistol and attempts to shoot him, but he's able to knock the gun. He's actually able to kick the gun out and just actually rips the throat out, which is apparently what Dalton's most well known for, ripping throats in a vicious way. Apparently Doc is disgusted by this, and then Dalton receives next morning really, Dalton receives the phone call from Wesley and has Dalton make a choice, to call heads or tails when Wade flips a coin, either to have Wade or Doc killed, and Wesley decides to leave the outcome unknown and actually hangs up. And then when this is happening when when Dalton returns to the bar, and then Wade comes into the bar all badly pretty beaten up, barely just standing, and Dalton has to help him up, and Dalton realizes that Wesley wins, and unfortunately he makes the mistake of leaving Wade, so he attempts to get Doc out of there, but she refuses to leave with them because he's of course repulsed by his increasingly violent nature. And then Dalton returns back to the Double Deuce and sees that Wade is laying on his side, but then finds out there was a knife lodged in his chest with a note reading it was Tails. And enraged at this point, Dalton pulls the knife out, jumps in his car, and attempts to settle the score with Wesley once and for all. And then he's able to somehow use his Mercedes and put it in I guess neutral, and then actually drives it into Wesley's estate. And several of the main people there, Wesley, the Wayne henchmen, which are Morgan, Ketchum, Pat, O'Connor, and Tigger, they all they all draw all sorts of gunfire on the car, and eventually it crashes and explodes. And then when they open the door, the car is definitely empty. The knife that was used is stuck in the accelerator. That's how he was able to do it. And then you find out that Ketchum is the guy that pretty much stabbed Wade. And then somehow, using the distraction, Dalton sneaks into the estate and is able to dispatch each of Wesley's henchmen, which is O'Connor, Morgan, and then he comes to face with Ketchum, takes him out. He's able to kill Pat McCurran as well, and then he's able to, when in Wesley's trophy room, he's able to encounter Tigger. He actually pushes this, I guess, the stuffed statue or stuffed taxidermy type of animal, which is a polar bear. He pushes it onto Tigger. It doesn't kill him, but it just knocks him out for some time. And then eventually Dalton and Wesley face each other, where Dalton is actually shot, but he actually manages to land some punches, and Dalton does gain the upper hand, and also attempts to try to finish Wesley off in the same brutal manner as Jimmy, but he decides against it, mainly because he sees that Doc is there, and then apparently walks away. But then Wesley sees the opportunity to reach for a gun and attempts to shoot at Dalton, but then Red, Emmett, Stoutmeyer, Teigman all come to Dalton's aid, and they all unload on him with their shotguns, with Teigman landing the final blow, and they stash their weapons away somewhere where before the arrival of the law enforcement come in, and they pretend to say they didn't see anything until Tier says that he saw a photograph on him. But yeah, and they all cooperate with each other's innocence, and then the implication of what happened at Wesley's house, will remain a secret. And then the final scene shows Cody at his band, performing the song "When the Night Comes Coming from the Sky," and it cuts while the song's going on. It cuts to Dalton and Doc enjoying each other's company in a swimming hole, and suggesting that pretty much Dalton decides to remain in the town for good. That's pretty much your ending. So yeah, this film was definitely fun with some, fun moments. Some lines, "Pain don't hurt," or like I said before, "You're too stupid to have a good time," or whenever Dalton fires the main patrons that he knows are unruly or just not right for the job. It'll get worse before it gets better type of lines. But here, is this film perfect? No. I'll actually get into the cons of the film. I think looking back at the cons, this film suffered from quite a bit of editing, disjointing editing problems, because apparently from what I read, this film was over 3 hours long. There was like some good character moments, like you see the tattoo of Rose on Wade's, I think it's on his arm, but the tattoo of Wade's, which is Rose, it's actually about a woman that Wade was involved with, and he screwed up his chance with her, and he actually tells Dalton to not make that same mistake with Doc. And there was also moments where there was a different fight scene with Ketchum instead of the one you saw in the theatrical cut, and there were certain lines in the trailer when it was promoted, like Dalton saying "Don't be rude," or another scene with Wade Garrett where says "So the sounding philosopher." And there's actually a moment where apparently Red is with Dalton at the bar after his business had blown up. And then Wesley tells Red, "Hey, how about that fire sale?" or something like that, literally, since his place went up in smoke. And there was other moments too, like Kathleen Wilhoit's character was cut out of the film quite a bit. She had a little bit more scenes. Like there was actually a scene in the trailer where I guess she's trying to seduce Dalton. She's like, do you not like women, or do you feel like I'm not the best? And he's like, and then Dalton's like, "There is the best I've ever had," or something like that. So yeah. So quite a bit of number of scenes were cut, like character moments with Kathleen Wilhoit, and there was more scenes with Wade Garrett. And oh yeah, the scenes with Keith David's character, Ernie Bass, the way he was introduced was kind of odd. Like it already showed that he was, already working there for a while. Apparently there was an intro to his character, like apparently there was a scene with him and his girlfriend, and he got into a fight with some people, and somehow he eventually got hired. He was one of the new bartenders whenever the club started becoming more upscale, and they were wearing red shirts and stuff like that. And then apparently there was also scenes where apparently Swayze's character Dalton was training them to use ballet and stuff like that, I guess as a way to handle, I forget what it was, but he would be training them in ballet, and they would wear certain clothing or something like that. So yeah. So I felt like the editing was a problem. Like it was kind of over the place. Like it cuts from one scene to another. Felt like certain character moments were lacking, or they were just introduced out of place or something like that. So I felt like Oh yeah, and there was another thing. Apparently, the fight scenes were cut down. Like you actually saw how Dalton took out O'Connor and Morgan. Like they actually showed that, but for some reason, when we see it, they already show them already being dead already. So somehow that ended up getting on the cutting room floor. So I don't know why they did that. And to be honest, while I think Kelly Lynch and Patrick Swayze, have some nice moments, I felt like their chemistry was a little lacking, and I find it kind of odd how they would kind of fall for each other that quickly. I felt like it was kind of out of place. I mean, she is a good-looking woman, and I felt like how they would interact just seemed rather sudden. I felt like they could have developed that better. And looking back, I think the ending, even though it was a nice little fight scene between Wesley, I wish they would have showed more of what Dalton was actually doing to O'Connor, and then of course Morgan, because you only saw the aftermath of their death. You never saw how he actually took them out. It's like whenever Ketchum was looking around, that's how he found them already dead. So I wish they would have added a little more to the fight scene. And there was actually a different fight scene with Ketchum that was used differently in the theatrical cut. So yeah, I think those are my main problems with the film. But other than that, the film's entertaining. It's got great fight scenes, great one-liners, like I said before. It's really hard to say which. There's so many lines, or honey, I'll get all the sleep when I need when I'm dead. When Wade is interacting with Dalton and getting to know Doc, so there's some nice little character moments there. And there's also a scene where Wade has to assist Dalton whenever he's getting beat up by that Morgan thug, and they have some nice little moments together where they have to fight those people, and yeah, it's just fun stuff. And where they have to take out the trash, where after Dalton says, "Yeah, too stupid to have a good time," and they have a cool fight scene where him and several of the other bouncers are fighting Wesley's henchmen. They're not really notable. And then, of course, the fight scene right after Red's explosion was pretty well done. It has a kick-ass soundtrack. Hoochie Coochie Man, I think, is the name of the song. And then whenever Wesley's henchmen starts the brawl, they all fight. You see how Wade and Dalton are fighting off these henchmen, which is handled very well. And then you see how very lethal and dangerous Jimmy is. Like, he's able to take out Dalton's bouncers pretty effectively. Like, he's able to take out the out of shape guy, the ones that are in fairly decent shape. Like, he's able to knock them out with the pool stick, because they have a pool table there. And then he starts fighting with Wade, and while Wade has his moments, he's almost getting owned because he's getting old. And then Dalton has that brief scrimmage with Dalton, and they definitely have that ultimate fight scene between Dalton and Jimmy, where he says, "Prepare to die," and Dalton's like, you are such an asshole," and they start fighting. Where moments where you see how Dalton's able to block this punch or attack, and then there's moments where Jimmy would have his way on Dalton. And then right where Jimmy's kind of owning Dalton for a bit, and of course he says the funny line where he says, "I used to fuck guys like you in prison," which is hilarious as hell. But now that I think about it, I feel like, what else he's gonna say? I wear lace panties. But anyways, it's just a fun scene. And then when Dalton starts to get the upper hand and starts knocking the fuck out of Jimmy and using so many kicks, and of course whenever Jimmy tries to take him out with the pistol, he's able to knock it off and just rip his throat off, just to show how dangerous Dalton can be. And yeah, so it's hard to say because there's just so many fun character moments, like the fight scenes at the bar, or whenever Dalton has to get physical with Wesley's henchman earlier, before because of the fact that Wesley's nephew was fired by Dalton. So yeah, it's just like how they apparently he was trained by Benny Jett. I forget what. Let's see, Benny Jett training. Benny Jett something, I can't remember. It's on IMDb. apparently this Benny Jet guy, he had quite a record. He had like 9 black belts. So yeah, he was able to get the training. Swayze was able to take the training pretty well, and it showed how well he was able to handle himself against Wesley's thugs. By showing off his martial arts skills. But yeah, it's just a very fun action type ride that just filled with some awesome, some very somewhat cheesy one-liners, but it's still overall a very fun movie, and it never lets up. And there's some, I don't know what else to say, but it's definitely a fun movie, and sadly it didn't do all that great. It only made like $30 million against its $15 million budget, but it would become a great cult classic. And just the fact that there's no CGI, all the fight scenes they're very well choreographed. That's what I'm going to have to say. I think the way they handled it, I think Swayze took the training very well. It's unfortunate that he got injured because, in fact, he had some knee-related injury problems. Like, he had to actually have his knee drained, apparently. And it was mainly because of that. That's why, like I said before, he was unable to take the role of Gabriel Cash. He was not able to do that because of his knee injuries. And he actually had some knee injury issues in the previous film, Dirty Dancing. So it's unfortunate he wasn't able to do Gabriel Cash, but I think Kurt Russell did fine in that role. So, but yeah, gosh, it's really hard to say what is so great about this film, but it's just entertaining. Yeah, it does have its, I guess cheese-filled moments, as you like to say, but it's just fun. It's a film that doesn't take itself seriously. It's not here to be a Shakespeare play. It's not about that. It's about, kicking back, watching. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, there was a fun scene. I'm sorry about this. It just came back to me. There's apparently this one scene, like, right when the Double Deuce was still undergoing, its its problems of brawl fights and slaughterhouses. Like, there's a scene with Frank Welker, who is the guy that he's like, for $20 you can kiss my woman's tits, pretty much. And he's like, are you kidding me? And then get her kiss. And then apparently this guy comes on and starts rubbing on them, and the guy's like, hey, what are you gonna do, buddy? You're gonna kiss him or not? He's like, I can't. And Welker's character's like, what do you mean you can't? I ain't got $20. And then that whole brawl starts. Everything, like, everyone starts attacking each other, and just a whole lot of chaos going on. Oh yeah, there's that one scene where he fires Steve, or where he's talking about, earlier whenever Dalton says, I want you to be nice till it's time to not be nice. And one of them says, I just want you to know that it's just a job, nothing personal. And then one of the earlier bouncers, before he was fired, said, being called a cocksucker is not personal. And Dalton's like, nope, it's just two pronouns for a prescribed response. To allow an illicit response, pretty much. And then he's like, what if someone calls my mama a whore? And then Dalton says, is she? A great rhetorical response. And then eventually, since Steve, is not reliable and starts letting these ladies in without any kind of authenticated IDs, like, he catches Steve having sex with this one lady. He's like, yo, Steve, your history. And he's like, but I'm on my break. And he's like, stay on it. So yeah, I thought that was fun. But just overall, it's just a fun film. All the fight scenes are well choreographed. I just wish they should have put some certain scenes back in there to give, characters a little more depth, because it was a pretty long film, like I said. And I kind of find the part where Doc and Dalton fall for each other rather too quickly. And then I wish the fight scene, along with Wesley's henchmen, I wish they would have added more scenes where it shows how he took out O'Connor and then Morgan, because I thought it happened rather fast. But anyway, you slice it, the action's good. Nope, it's all practical effects, very well choreographed by Benny Jet, and it's a very fun and classical, quintessential 80s film. Doesn't get any better than that. But yeah, I think I'm going to end it here. Stay tuned for my next review of Black Rain, and I can't believe I went for that long. But anyway, you slice it, Roadhouse is a fun movie. I'm thankful that remake got canceled, and the sequel, from what I heard, sucks ass, and you should just stick with the first one. There's no need to watch the sequel. It's just, if you want to satisfy your curiosity with that sequel, be my guest, but I know I won't. So, but yeah. Well, there you go. If you like this video, feel free to sub, and hopefully you'll like my other reviews, and hopefully you'll like my next one, which is Black Rain. So stay tuned for that. Okay, see you later, folks. Later.